My name is Jessica Martinez, and at 34, I thought I understood my place in the Blackwood family hierarchy. As the daughter-in-law who married down, I'd spent 8 years being treated like an outsider by my wealthy in-laws. That all changed the day of Eleanor Blackwood's will reading, when the family lawyer announced that she'd left Minot, her precious son's, the controlling stake in her multi-million-dollar empire. What happened next would expose decades of family secrets and change everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and worth. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family or discovered that people aren't who they seem to be, this story is for you. Hit that like button and subscribe, because sometimes the biggest surprises come from the most unexpected places. I was standing in the marble foyer of the Blackwood estate when I received the call that would change everything. Eleanor Blackwood, my mother-in-law of 8 years, had passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 73. The woman who had never fully accepted me into her family was gone, and with her passing came a summons that filled me with dread: the reading of her will. All family members are expected to attend, the lawyer's crisp voice informed me over the phone. Tuesday at 2 o'clock, please be prompt. I hung up and looked around the modest apartment I shared with my husband Marcus in downtown Sacramento. The contrast between our simple home and the Blackwood family mansion in Nob Hill couldn't have been more stark. Everything about our lives screamed the truth that the Blackwoods had never let me forget. I wasn't one of them. The Blackwood family wealth came from Eleanor's late husband, Richard Blackwood, who had built a construction empire from a single truck and a willingness to work 18-hour days. By the time he died 15 years ago, Blackwood Construction had become one of California's largest development companies, with projects spanning from luxury hotels to affordable housing developments throughout the state. Eleanor had inherited everything and had run the company with an iron fist ever since. She was a formidable woman, sharp, demanding, and absolutely devoted to preserving the family legacy she and Richard had built together. She had very specific ideas about what kind of people belonged in the Blackwood family, and I had never quite measured up to her standards. I met Marcus 8 years ago when I was working as a paralegal at a small law firm in Sacramento. He'd come in to handle some routine business paperwork, and I was immediately struck by his kindness and sense of humor. Marcus was different from the men I usually dated: gentler, more thoughtful, and completely uninterested in impressing anyone with his family's money. "I should probably mention," he'd said over coffee on our third date, "my family has some money. It makes things complicated sometimes." That was the understatement of the century. Our first family dinner at the Blackwood estate was a disaster of epic proportions. I dressed carefully in my best dress, a simple black number from Target that I thought looked professional. Eleanor greeted me in head-to-toe designer clothing, her diamond jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandelier in the foyer. "So you're the paralegal," she'd said, her tone making my profession sound like something distasteful she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Yes, I work at Morrison, Lee and Associates," I'd replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "How quaint," Eleanor had responded, her smile never reaching her eyes. The evening went downhill from there. Eleanor peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Where had I gone to college? Community college, then state school, not prestigious enough. What did my parents do for a living? My father was a mechanic, my mother a preschool teacher, definitely not impressive enough. Did I have any family money or connections? No and no. Marcus's brother Cameron and his wife Victoria made sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy as well. Cameron was 3 years older than Marcus and worked as vice president of operations at Blackwood Construction. Victoria came from old San Francisco money and never let anyone forget it. "Jessica dear," Victoria had said during that first dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you simply must tell me where you found that adorable little dress. I'm always looking for budget-friendly options to recommend to my housekeeper." The insult was delivered with such polish that I almost missed it, but the meaning was clear. I belonged with the help, not at their dinner table. Despite the family's obvious disapproval, Marcus and I continued dating. He was worth enduring his family's snobbery, and I genuinely believed that love would eventually win them over. I was naive enough to think that if I just tried hard enough, worked hard enough, and proved myself worthy enough, they would eventually accept me. When Marcus proposed after 2 years of dating, Eleanor's reaction was swift and brutal. "Absolutely not," she'd said when Marcus told her our news. "I will not have the Blackwood name dragged down by some gold-digging paralegal who thinks she can marry her way into money." "Mother, that's enough," Marcus had replied, his voice sharp with anger. "I love Jessica and I'm going to marry her with or without your blessing." "Then you'll do it without my financial support," Eleanor had shot back. "If you insist on this mistake, then you'll have to make your own way in the world." True to her word, Eleanor cut Marcus off financially. The trust fund he'd been living on disappeared overnight. His position at Blackwood Construction was eliminated in a company restructuring. Even his apartment, which had been in a building owned by the family company, was suddenly no longer available. Marcus took it all with remarkable grace. "I should have been standing on my own feet years ago anyway," he told me as we looked for an apartment we could actually afford on my paralegal salary and his new job at a smaller construction firm. "Maybe this is the push I needed." We had a small wedding at the courthouse with just our closest friends present. None of the Blackwood family attended, though Marcus sent them an invitation. The only response was a formal note from Eleanor expressing her regret at being unable to attend due to a prior commitment. For the first few years of our marriage, we were essentially estranged from the Blackwood family. Marcus would receive obligatory birthday and Christmas cards, but there were no invitations to family gatherings, no holiday celebrations, no acknowledgement that he'd married at all. I told myself I didn't care. Marcus and I were building a good life together. I'd been promoted to senior paralegal and was taking night classes to become a lawyer myself. Marcus had proven himself invaluable at his new company and had been promoted twice. We were saving money, planning for the future, and genuinely happy despite having to budget for everything from groceries to date nights. But I'd be lying if I said Eleanor's rejection didn't hurt. I'd grown up in a close, loving family where my parents welcomed everyone with open arms. The idea that someone could look at me and find me fundamentally lacking as a human being was devastating in ways I didn't expect. The thaw in family relations began about 3 years ago when Eleanor had a minor heart attack. Marcus rushed to the hospital despite years of estrangement, and I went with him. Eleanor was lying in the cardiac unit, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Thank you for coming," she'd said to Marcus, pointedly ignoring my presence. "Of course I came," Marcus had replied. "You're my mother." Something about seeing Eleanor vulnerable seemed to crack the ice between them slightly. Over the following months, there were occasional phone calls and eventually an invitation to Sunday dinner at the estate. Those family dinners were exercises in endurance for me. Eleanor would ask polite questions about my job and studies, but the conversations always felt strained and formal. Cameron and Victoria continued to treat me like an interloper who might disappear if they ignored me long enough. "Still playing lawyer, I see," Victoria would say when Eleanor asked about my law school progress. "How ambitious of you." The condescension never stopped, but I learned to navigate it. I focused on Marcus and reminded myself that these people's opinions of me didn't define my worth. I had a husband who loved me, work that fulfilled me, and goals that I was steadily achieving despite their lack of support. Eleanor's health had been declining over the past year. She'd had another, more serious heart attack 6 months ago, followed by a stroke that left her partially paralyzed on her left side. She'd continued to run Blackwood Construction from her hospital bed and later from the estate, but everyone could see that she was failing. Marcus and I had been visiting her more frequently in recent months. I'd noticed that Eleanor seemed to be watching me differently during these visits, asking more pointed questions about my work and my opinions on various business matters. "What do you think about the affordable housing project in East Sacramento?" she'd asked me just a few weeks before her death. I'd been surprised by the question but had answered honestly. "I think it's important work. Everyone deserves a safe place to live, regardless of their income level. Companies that can make a profit while also serving their communities are doing something valuable." Eleanor had nodded thoughtfully but hadn't responded. I'd assumed she was just making conversation. Now, standing in that lawyer's office with the rest of the Blackwood family, I realized those conversations might have meant more than I'd understood. The law offices of Peterson, Hartley and Associates were located in one of San Francisco's most prestigious buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Everything about the office screamed old money and established power, exactly the kind of place where the Blackwood family would handle their legal affairs. I sat next to Marcus in one of the leather chairs arranged in front of the massive mahogany desk, feeling like I was about to be called into the principal's office. Cameron and Victoria sat across from us, whispering to each other in low tones. Eleanor's sister Margaret had flown in from Phoenix and sat stiffly in the corner, clutching her purse like a shield. James Peterson, the senior partner who had handled the Blackwood family affairs for over 20 years, entered the room carrying a thick folder and wearing the expression of someone who was about to deliver news that wouldn't be well received by everyone present. "Thank you all for coming," he began, settling behind his desk. "As you know, we're here for the reading of Eleanor Blackwood's last will and testament. I should mention that Eleanor made several changes to her will in the months before her death, so some of the provisions may come as a surprise." My stomach tightened. Surprises in will readings were never good news for the people who hadn't been part of the family inner circle. "Before we begin," Peterson continued, "I want to assure you that Eleanor was of completely sound mind when she made these decisions. I have detailed medical records and psychiatric evaluations to support her mental competency if any questions arise." Cameron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Why would questions arise about her mental state? Peterson's smile was diplomatically neutral. "Let's proceed with the reading, and I think you'll understand my precaution." He opened the folder and began reading in the formal legal language that makes even simple bequests sound complicated. Eleanor had left various personal items to family members, jewelry to Margaret, books to Marcus, artwork to Cameron. These seemed like normal, expected bequests. Then Peterson reached the section about the business assets, and the room fell silent. "To my daughter-in-law, Jessica Martinez Blackwood, who has shown more integrity, intelligence, and true understanding of the values that built this company than any blood relative, I leave controlling interest in Blackwood Construction and Development, comprising 65% of all company shares." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. I felt the blood drain from my face as every person in the room turned to stare at me. "I'm sorry," Cameron said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Could you repeat that?" Peterson read the passage again, word for word. "The 65% controlling interest in Blackwood Construction worth an estimated $47 million belonged to me." "This is impossible," Victoria whispered, her face flushed with anger. "She can't have left the family business to her." "There must be some mistake," Cameron added, standing up abruptly. "My mother would never." "There's no mistake," Peterson interrupted calmly. "Eleanor was very specific about this bequest. She also left detailed explanations for her decisions, which she asked me to read aloud." He pulled out another document and began reading again, this time in Eleanor's own words. "To those who may question my decision to leave controlling interest in Blackwood Construction to Jessica, I want to explain my reasoning. Over the past 8 years, I have watched Jessica work tirelessly to better herself, pursue her education, and support my son Marcus without ever asking for anything from our family. When Marcus was cut off financially after their marriage, Jessica could have pressured him to reconcile with us for the sake of money. Instead, she encouraged him to build his own career and reputation. When I was hospitalized, Jessica visited regularly and asked thoughtful questions about my care, while others in the family seemed more interested in discussing the future of the company. Most importantly, Jessica has consistently demonstrated the values that built this company: hard work, integrity, and a commitment to serving the community rather than just pursuing profit. She understands that our success comes with responsibilities to our employees and our community. I have watched my sons grow up with privilege they did not earn, and develop a sense of entitlement that concerns me. Cameron has shown more interest in the status that comes with running the company than in the work itself. He has repeatedly pushed for projects that would maximize short-term profits at the expense of our workforce and community relationships. Marcus, while a good man with a kind heart, has never shown interest in the business. He is happy in his current career and would view inheriting the company as a burden rather than an opportunity. Jessica, on the other hand, has the education, the work ethic, and the moral compass to lead Blackwood Construction into the future while maintaining the values that made it successful. I trust her to honor Richard's legacy in a way that serves our employees, our community, and our family's reputation." The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen in my chair, trying to process what I'd just heard. Eleanor had been watching me all these years, evaluating my character, and had apparently decided that woman she'd once called a gold-digging paralegal was the right person to inherit the family empire. "This is insane," Cameron finally said, his voice shaking with rage. "She's not even family. She's an outsider who married in for money." "That's exactly the kind of thinking Eleanor was concerned about," Peterson said calmly. She anticipated that there might be legal challenges to her will, which is why she was so thorough in documenting her mental competency and her reasoning. Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We'll contest this. No court in the world would uphold such an obviously manipulated will." "You're welcome to try," Peterson replied, "but I should warn you that Eleanor also included provisions specifically addressing potential challenges. Any family member who contests the will and loses will forfeit all other bequests." "Cameron, that would include the 20% stake in the company that's been left to you, as well as your trust fund and your position at the company." The threat was clear: challenge the will and risk losing everything. I finally found my voice. I don't understand. Eleanor never liked me. She made that clear from the day we met." Peterson smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Eleanor left a personal letter for you as well, Jessica. She asked me to give it to you after the formal reading." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Eleanor's careful handwriting. My hands were shaking as I opened it and unfolded the pages inside. "My dear Jessica," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then my plan has worked and you are now the majority owner of Blackwood Construction. I imagine you're feeling shocked and perhaps overwhelmed by this responsibility. Let me explain why I chose you. When Marcus first brought you to our home 8 years ago, I must admit that I was prepared to dislike you. I had very specific ideas about the kind of woman who should marry into our family, and you didn't fit those preconceived notions. I was wrong, and I owe you an apology for the coldness I showed you in those early years. Over time, I began to watch you more carefully. I saw how you supported Marcus when I cut him off, never pressuring him to choose between his family and his dignity. I observed how you worked multiple jobs while attending law school, never complaining about the sacrifices you were making. I noticed how you treated our household staff with respect and kindness, something that many people in our social circle fail to do. Most importantly, I realized that you understood something about success that my own children had never learned, that real achievement comes from hard work and integrity, not from inheritance or entitlement. When I had my heart attack 3 years ago, you came to the hospital even though I had given you no reason to care about my welfare. You asked thoughtful questions about my recovery and seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being, not just the implications for the family business. During our recent conversations about company projects, your responses showed me that you understand the balance between profit and social responsibility that Richard and I always tried to maintain. You see the business as a way to serve the community, not just as a source of wealth. I know this inheritance will be controversial, and I'm sure you're wondering if you're capable of running such a large company. Let me assure you that you are more than capable. Your legal education gives you the skills to understand complex business contracts and regulations. Your work ethic ensures that you'll put in the effort required to learn what you don't already know. Most importantly, your character guarantees that you'll make decisions based on what's right, not what's easy or profitable. I'm not giving you this company because I want to punish my sons or shock the family. I'm giving it to you because I believe you're the person most likely to preserve Richard's legacy and continue building something that makes a positive difference in the world. The company is in good financial shape with strong management teams in place. You won't have to rebuild anything, just guide it forward. Trust your instincts, seek advice from people you respect, and never forget that the greatest business success comes from serving others. Welcome to the family, Jessica. You earned your place here long before today. With respect and affection, Eleanor Blackwood. I was crying by the time I finished reading the letter, tears streaming down my face as I tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Eleanor, the woman who had seemed to barely tolerate my presence for 8 years, had been watching, evaluating, and ultimately deciding that I was worthy of her trust. Marcus reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Are you okay?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Cameron, meanwhile, was pacing behind his chair, his face red with anger. This is unacceptable. That company belongs in the family, not with some outsider who manipulated a sick old woman. Careful, Cameron, Peterson warned. Those accusations could constitute grounds for a defamation lawsuit, especially now that Jessica is the majority owner of the company. The legal implications of my new position were starting to sink in. As the controlling shareholder, I would have final say over all major business decisions. I could hire and fire executives, approve or reject projects, and determine the company's strategic direction. Cameron, who had been expecting to inherit control of the company, would now be answering to me. There has to be a way to challenge this. Victoria said, her voice sharp with desperation. No sane person leaves a multi-million-dollar company to their daughter-in-law instead of their own children. Eleanor anticipated that reaction, Peterson said, opening another folder. She also left very specific instructions about the transition of power. Jessica, she wanted me to arrange a meeting with the company's senior management team for tomorrow morning. Eleanor felt it was important to introduce you to the key players as quickly as possible. I finally found my voice. I need time to think about this. This is overwhelming. Of course, Peterson agreed, but I should mention that Eleanor also left instructions about what should happen if you choose not to accept the inheritance. If you decline, the shares would be sold to the highest bidder outside the family, with the proceeds going to various charities. The company would no longer be family-owned. The threat was clear: accept the inheritance or watch the family business be sold to strangers. Cameron's face went from red to white. She planned this. She planned all of this to force us to accept her decision. Eleanor was a very thorough woman, Peterson agreed. She wanted to ensure that her wishes were respected. As we left the lawyer's office, the family dynamics had shifted dramatically. Cameron and Victoria walked ahead of us, whispering angrily to each other. Margaret shuffled along behind, looking stunned by the afternoon's revelations. Marcus and I walked in silence until we reached our car. Once we were alone, he turned to me with a mixture of amazement and concern. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked. I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes. Terrified, honored, confused, I never imagined Eleanor thought of me as anything more than an unwelcome addition to the family. She was always watching people. Marcus said thoughtfully. Even when we were kids, she'd observe how we handled situations before making judgments about our character. I should have realized she was doing the same thing with you. "Do you think I can do this?" I asked. "Run a company that size?" Marcus smiled and took my hand. "I think Eleanor was right about you. You have the intelligence, the work ethic, and the integrity to handle whatever challenges come up. And you won't be doing it alone. The company has good people in place." That evening, we sat in our modest apartment, trying to process the day's events. The contrast between our simple home and the responsibility I'd just inherited was surreal. Yesterday, I'd been a paralegal saving money for law school tuition. Today, I was the majority owner of a construction empire worth nearly $50 million. "What happens now?" I asked Marcus as we sat on our couch, eating takeout Chinese food and trying to wrap our minds around our new reality. "Now you decide what kind of leader you want to be," he said. "Eleanor gave you this opportunity because she believed you'd use it well. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" I thought about Eleanor's letter, about her belief that I understood the balance between profit and social responsibility. I thought about the affordable housing projects she'd mentioned, about the employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's success, about the communities that would be affected by the decisions I'd make. "I want to prove she was right about me," I said finally. "I want to build something that makes a difference." The next morning, I walked into the Blackwood construction headquarters wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of notes I'd made about the company's current projects. The building was a gleaming high-rise in San Francisco's financial district, with the Blackwood name prominently displayed in the lobby. Peterson had arranged for me to meet with the senior management team at 9 o'clock. As I rode the elevator to the executive floor, I tried to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. These were people who had worked with Eleanor for years, who knew the business inside and out. They had every reason to question whether a paralegal with no construction experience could effectively lead their company. The conference room was intimidating, with its long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 6 senior executives were already seated when I arrived, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Good morning, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. I'm sure yesterday's news came as a surprise to all of you. It certainly surprised me. Thomas Rivera, the company's chief operating officer, spoke first. Miss Blackwood. Martinez, I corrected gently. I've kept my maiden name. Miss Martinez, he continued. We're all wondering what this change in ownership means for the company's direction and for our positions here. It was a fair question, and I'd prepared for it. I want to be completely transparent with all of you. I have a legal background, but I don't have construction industry experience. I'm going to need to rely heavily on your expertise as I learn the business. Some of the tension in the room seemed to ease. At least I was acknowledging what I didn't know. That said, I continued, I do have some thoughts about the company's future direction, based on conversations I had with Eleanor and my own observations of your recent projects. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the notes I'd made. I've been reviewing your current project portfolio and I'm impressed by the diversity of work you're doing. The luxury hotel developments are clearly profitable, but I'm particularly interested in the affordable housing initiatives. Sandra Kim, the head of the residential division, looked surprised. Those projects have smaller profit margins, she said carefully. But they serve an important community need, I replied, and they build goodwill and reputation that benefit all our projects. I'd like to explore expanding that area of our business. For the next 2 hours, we discussed each division's current projects, challenges, and opportunities. I asked questions about everything from worker safety protocols to environmental impact assessments. The executives gradually warmed up as they realized I was genuinely interested in learning about their work and wasn't planning to make dramatic changes without understanding the implications. Miss Martinez, said David Walsh, the chief financial officer, as the meeting wound down, if you don't mind me asking, what's your long-term vision for the company? I'd been thinking about that question since leaving the lawyer's office the day before. I want to build on the foundation that Richard and Eleanor created, but I want to be more intentional about balancing profit with social impact. I believe we can be successful financially while also making a positive difference in the communities we serve. After the meeting, I spent the rest of the day touring the company's offices and meeting employees at every level. I visited the architects department, where designers were working on plans for a new community center. I met with project managers who oversee construction sites across the state. I even visited the company's training facility, where apprentice electricians and plumbers were learning their trades. Everyone I met seemed cautiously optimistic about the change in leadership. Many employees mentioned that Eleanor had been increasingly focused on community impact in recent years, so my priorities weren't entirely surprising. It was during my tour of the training facility that I had the conversation that would shape my understanding of what Eleanor had really given me. Maria Santos, a 34-year-old single mother, was in her final month of the electrical apprenticeship program. She explained how the job training had allowed her to support her 2 children while building a career that would provide long-term stability. Miss Blackwood Eleanor started this program 5 years ago. Maria told me. She said that building things wasn't just about construction, it was about building people's lives too. What do you mean? I asked. This program doesn't just teach us technical skills. They help with childcare during training, they provide financial counseling to help us manage our money better, and they guarantee job placement with good wages when we complete the program. Miss Blackwood said that if you invest in people, they'll build great things. That evening, I sat in my apartment with stacks of company reports and financial statements spread across our dining table. Marcus found me there when he came home from work, looking overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information I was trying to absorb. How was your first day as a construction magnate? He asked, kissing the top of my head. Exhausting and inspiring, I said. I'm starting to understand what Eleanor saw in this company. It's not just about building structures, they're building communities, creating jobs, providing training programs. She turned it into something bigger than just a business. And now you get to decide what comes next, Marcus said, sitting down beside me. I thought about Maria Santos and the dozens of other people I'd met that day, architects passionate about sustainable design, project managers proud of their safety records, apprentices grateful for opportunities to build better lives. I want to expand the job training programs, I said, and I want to focus more on affordable housing and community development projects. We can still be profitable, but I want to be more intentional about using that profit to make a difference. Marcus smiled. Eleanor knew what she was doing when she picked you. The real test of my leadership came 2 weeks later when Cameron stormed into my new office at Blackwood Construction headquarters. I'd been reading reports and meeting with various department heads, trying to get up to speed on all the company's operations. "We need to talk," Cameron announced, shutting the door behind him with more force than necessary. I looked up from the environmental impact report I'd been reviewing. "Of course, please sit down." "I'll stand, thank you." Cameron's face was flushed with anger, and his usual polished composure had cracked. "I want to know what you think you're doing with this company." "I'm learning about the business and making plans for its future," I said calmly. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" "You canceled the Riverside Luxury Homes project." I had indeed canceled that project 3 days earlier after reviewing the plans and financial projections. The environmental impact was too severe, and the community opposition was significant. I didn't think it aligned with our company values. "Our company values?" Cameron laughed bitterly. "You've been in charge for 2 weeks and you're already talking about company values? That project would have generated $12 million in profit. At the cost of destroying wetlands and displacing low-income families," I replied. "The legal challenges alone would have cost us millions, not to mention the damage to our reputation." Cameron leaned forward, placing his hands on my desk. "Let me explain something to you, Jessica. This company was built by my father and run by my mother for 15 years. I've worked here since I graduated college. You may own the majority shares, but I understand this business in ways you never will." I stood up, meeting his gaze directly. "You're right that I have a lot to learn about the construction business, but I understand something about leadership that you seem to have missed." "Which is?" "That real leadership isn't about making the most money in the shortest time, it's about making decisions that serve all the stakeholders: employees, communities, shareholders, and the environment." Eleanor understood that. It's why she built a company with such a strong reputation. Cameron's expression hardened. "My mother left you this company in a moment of senility. Don't mistake that for validation of your judgment. Your mother was completely competent when she made her will." I said firmly. "The lawyer has medical documentation proving that. She made this decision because she believed I would protect the values she and your father built this company on." "We'll see about that," Cameron said, heading for the door. "This isn't over." After he left, I sat back down and tried to steady my hands. The confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Cameron wasn't wrong about my lack of experience in the construction industry. But Eleanor's letter had been clear about why she'd chosen me, and I had to trust her judgment. Over the following months, I threw myself into learning every aspect of the business. I attended industry conferences, met with community leaders, and visited construction sites to see our projects firsthand. I also began implementing changes that reflected my vision for the company's future. I expanded the job training programs that Maria Santos had told me about, adding new tracks for solar panel installation and green construction techniques. I partnered with local nonprofits to develop more affordable housing projects. I instituted new environmental standards for all company projects, even when they weren't required by law. The changes weren't without controversy. Some employees, particularly those loyal to Cameron, questioned whether I was prioritizing social impact over profitability. But the financial results spoke for themselves. Despite initial concerns, the company's profits remained strong, while our reputation in the community improved dramatically. The breakthrough came 6 months after Eleanor's death, when we won a massive contract to develop affordable housing throughout the Sacramento region. The project was worth $45 million over 3 years and would provide homes for over 800 low-income families. "How did we get this contract?" Thomas Rivera asked during the management meeting where we discussed the award. "They said our combination of technical expertise and community commitment made us the obvious choice," Sandra Kim reported. "The selection committee was particularly impressed by our job training programs and our environmental standards." I felt a surge of vindication. Eleanor had been right. Doing well and doing good weren't mutually exclusive. In fact, our commitment to social responsibility was making us more competitive, not less. That evening, Marcus and I celebrated over dinner at our favorite restaurant, the same modest Italian place where we'd had our first date 8 years earlier. "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his wine glass. "You've proven that Eleanor made the right choice." "I hope so," I said. "Some days I still feel like I'm in over my head." "That's what makes you a good leader," Marcus replied. "You care enough to question yourself." As we talked about the affordable housing project and what it would mean for the company's future, I realized how much my life had changed since that shocking day in the lawyer's office. I'd gone from feeling like an outsider in the Blackwood family to becoming the person responsible for carrying forward their legacy. But the real transformation hadn't been in my bank account or my job title. It had been in my understanding of my own worth and capabilities. Eleanor's decision to trust me with her life's work had forced me to see myself through her eyes as someone worthy of respect, capable of leadership, and committed to using power responsibly. A year after Eleanor's death, I stood before the company's annual shareholders meeting, preparing to give my first official report as majority owner and CEO. The conference room was packed with investors, employees, and community leaders who had come to hear about Blackwood Construction's performance under new leadership. When Eleanor Blackwood left me controlling interest in this company, I began. Many people questioned whether someone with my background could successfully lead a construction empire. Today, I'm here to share the results of our first year under new ownership. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, showing the company's financial performance. Despite implementing new environmental standards and expanding our community programs, Blackwood Construction's profits increased by 15% over the previous year. We completed projects worth over $100 million, employed an average of 450 people, and maintained our perfect safety record. The room buzzed with impressed murmurs. Even the most skeptical investors couldn't argue with those numbers. More importantly, I continued, we've fulfilled Eleanor's vision of a company that serves its community while generating profits for shareholders. Our job training programs graduated 127 new skilled workers, with 98% finding permanent employment. We've broken ground on affordable housing developments that will provide homes for over 1,200 families. And we've reduced our environmental impact by 30% through new construction methods and materials. I paused, looking out at the audience. In the front row, I spotted Cameron and Victoria, their faces carefully neutral, but their body language tense. They'd remained shareholders in the company, but their influence had diminished significantly as I'd proven my competence as a leader. Eleanor Blackwood once told me that success isn't just about building structures, it's about building people's lives. This past year has proven that profitability and social responsibility aren't competing goals, they're complementary strategies that create sustainable, long-term value for everyone involved. After the presentation, I mingled with shareholders and community leaders, accepting congratulations and discussing future projects. It was during this reception that I had an unexpected conversation that would reveal just how much the family dynamics had shifted. Margaret, Eleanor's sister who had seemed so shocked at the will reading, approached me with a warm smile. "Jessica, dear," she said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "For doubting Eleanor's judgment. When she first told me she was considering leaving you the company, I thought she'd lost her mind. A paralegal with no business experience? It seemed like madness." My eyes widened. "She talked to you about it beforehand?" Margaret nodded. "Oh yes, she'd been planning this for over 2 years. She used to call me and talk about watching you, about the questions you asked and the way you treated people. She was quite impressed by your character." This revelation stunned me. Eleanor had been planning to leave me the company for years, not making a last-minute decision as Cameron had suggested. "What changed her mind about me?" I asked. Margaret smiled. "She told me about the time you visited her in the hospital after her first heart attack. Most people asked about her will or the company's future. You asked about her pain levels and whether she was getting enough sleep. Eleanor said that's when she knew you understood what really mattered." The conversation was interrupted by Thomas Rivera, who approached with an urgent expression. "Jessica, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation that needs your attention," he said quietly. "There's been an accident at the Oakwood Heights project." My blood ran cold. Construction accidents were every company owner's nightmare, not just because of the human cost but because of the potential legal and financial implications. "How serious?" I asked, already moving toward the exit. "One worker was injured when scaffolding collapsed. He's been taken to the hospital but his condition is stable. OSHA is sending investigators and the local news crews are setting up outside the site." I excused myself from the reception and headed straight to the construction site, my mind racing through the implications of what had happened. This would be my first major crisis as company owner, and how I handled it would set the tone for my leadership going forward. The Oakwood Heights project was one of our affordable housing developments, a 4-building complex that would provide 200 units for low-income families. When I arrived at the site, I could see the collapsed scaffolding and the cluster of emergency vehicles with their lights still flashing. Site supervisor Mike Rodriguez met me at the gate, his face grim but relieved. The injured worker is Carlos Mendoza, one of our best electricians. The scaffolding gave way while he was installing wiring on the 3rd floor. He fell about 15 feet but was wearing his safety harness, which probably saved his life. "What's his condition?" I asked. "Broken leg and some bruising, but he's conscious and alert. They've taken him to Sacramento General." "And what caused the scaffolding to collapse?" Mike's expression darkened. "That's what we need to figure out. The scaffolding was inspected just yesterday and passed all safety checks. This shouldn't have happened." I spent the next several hours at the site, working with OSHA investigators and our safety team to understand what had gone wrong. What we discovered was troubling. Someone had removed several crucial bolts from the scaffolding support structure, essentially sabotaging the safety system. This wasn't an accident. The OSHA investigator told me as we reviewed the evidence. Someone deliberately weakened this scaffolding. "Do you have any idea who might have done something like this?" I had suspicions, but I needed more evidence before making accusations. "We'll cooperate fully with your investigation," I told the investigator, "and we'll be conducting our own internal review as well." After visiting Carlos Mendoza in the hospital and ensuring his family had everything they needed, I returned to the office to deal with the media fallout. The evening news was already running stories about the accident, and I knew that how I responded would be crucial for the company's reputation. I decided to hold a press conference the next morning, taking full responsibility for the accident and outlining the steps we were taking to prevent future incidents. It was a risky move. Most corporate lawyers would advise against making public statements before all investigations were complete, but I felt it was the right thing to do. I want to start by saying that our thoughts and prayers are with Carlos Mendoza and his family. I began, facing a room full of reporters and cameras. Mr. Mendoza is a valued employee and a skilled craftsman, and we're grateful that his injuries weren't more serious. I paused, looking directly into the main camera. As the owner of Blackwood Construction, I take full responsibility for this accident. We pride ourselves on maintaining the highest safety standards in the industry, and we clearly failed in this case. Ms. Martinez called out a reporter from the Sacramento Bee. "Sources are saying this might have been sabotage rather than an equipment failure. Can you comment on that?" I'd expected this question. The investigation is ongoing and we're cooperating fully with OSHA and local law enforcement. If sabotage is confirmed, we will pursue all legal remedies available to us, but regardless of the cause, the responsibility for worker safety ultimately rests with management. "What are you doing to prevent future accidents?" asked another reporter. "We're implementing immediate additional safety protocols, including more frequent inspections and a buddy system for high-risk work. We're also reviewing our security procedures to prevent unauthorized access to our construction sites." The press conference was well received, with several news outlets praising our transparency and immediate response to the crisis. But the real test would come when the investigation revealed who was responsible for the sabotage. The answer came 3 days later when security footage from a nearby building showed Cameron entering the construction site late one evening, 2 days before the accident. The footage clearly showed him going directly to the scaffolding area with a toolbox. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Thomas Rivera knocked on my door, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "The police have identified who sabotaged the scaffolding." Even though I'd suspected Cameron, hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the stomach. "Are they arresting him?" "They're seeking a warrant now. Apparently, the security footage is pretty clear, and they found his fingerprints on the removed bolts." I sat back in my chair trying to process the implications. Marcus's brother had deliberately endangered a worker's life to sabotage my leadership of the company. The betrayal was staggering, even knowing how resentful Cameron had been about the inheritance. "There's more," Thomas continued. "The police think this might not have been his first attempt. They're reviewing security footage from other job sites where we've had unexplained equipment failures over the past few months." My phone rang before I could respond. It was Marcus, calling from his own office across town. "Jessica, I just heard from my mother's lawyer. Cameron's been arrested. Is it true that he sabotaged the construction site?" "It looks that way," I said, my voice heavier than I intended. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I know this must be devastating for you." "I can't believe he would do something so dangerous," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Someone could have been killed." "Someone was hurt," I reminded him gently. "Carlos is still in the hospital." "I know, I never thought my brother would go this far." That evening, Marcus and I sat in our living room trying to process the day's revelations. The man Marcus had grown up with, played with as a child, and considered his closest family member had deliberately endangered an innocent worker's life out of spite and jealousy. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Cameron will face criminal charges for reckless endangerment and sabotage," I said. "And the company will pursue civil damages for the costs of the accident and the damage to our reputation." "I mean, what happens with the family? Do we cut him off completely?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with all day. "That's up to you," I said finally. "He's your brother, and I won't make that decision for you, but I can't have someone who would endanger our workers anywhere near the company." Marcus nodded slowly. I think Eleanor was right about more than just your character. She saw things in Cameron that I didn't want to acknowledge." "What do you mean?" "His sense of entitlement, his willingness to put profit before people. I always thought he was just ambitious, but this shows something darker." The trial took place 6 months later. Cameron had initially tried to deny the charges, claiming he'd been framed, but the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, fingerprints, and testimony from workers who'd reported seeing him at job sites where he had no business being all pointed to a pattern of sabotage. I testified about the company's safety protocols and the impact of Cameron's actions on our employees and reputation. It was painful to see Marcus's brother in handcuffs, knowing how much it hurt my husband, but I couldn't forget Carlos Mendoza lying in that hospital bed. Cameron was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to both Carlos and the company. Victoria divorced him during the trial, claiming she'd had no knowledge of his actions and couldn't be married to someone who would endanger innocent people. The scandal made national news, with business publications using our case as an example of how family conflicts could destroy companies. But rather than damaging Blackwood Construction's reputation, the coverage actually enhanced it. Our transparent handling of the crisis and commitment to worker safety attracted new clients who wanted to work with a company that took responsibility for its actions. 2 years after Eleanor's death and 18 months after Cameron's arrest, I stood once again before our annual shareholders meeting. The company had not only survived the sabotage scandal but had thrived despite it. "This has been a challenging period for Blackwood Construction," I began, "but it's also been a defining one. We've proven that our commitment to safety and integrity isn't just marketing language, it's the foundation of how we do business." I clicked to a slide showing our financial performance. Despite the costs associated with the sabotage incident and enhanced security measures, our profits have increased by 23% over the previous year. We've completed projects worth over $150 million, employed an average of 580 people, and maintained a perfect safety record since implementing our new protocols. The applause was enthusiastic, and I could see genuine respect in the faces of shareholders who had once questioned Eleanor's decision to leave me the company. "More importantly," I continued, "we've stayed true to Eleanor Blackwood's vision of a company that builds more than structures. We build communities and opportunities." Our job training programs have graduated over 300 skilled workers, with 100% finding permanent employment. We've completed affordable housing developments providing homes for over 2,000 families. And we've established the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation, which provides college scholarships for children of construction workers. After the meeting, as shareholders and community leaders mingled over refreshments, I was approached by an unexpected visitor, Margaret, Eleanor's sister, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever. "Jessica dear," she said, "I have something for you." She handed me a small wrapped package. "Eleanor asked me to give this to you on the 2nd anniversary of her death, but only if you'd proven yourself worthy of her trust." I opened the package to find a simple gold bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a construction hard hat. Inside the box was a note in Eleanor's handwriting. If you're reading this, then you've successfully navigated your first 2 years as owner of Blackwood Construction. I knew you would. This bracelet belonged to Richard Hay, wore it every day when he was building the company from nothing. He believed that real success comes from building something that lasts, something that makes the world a little better. You've proven that you understand that philosophy. Wear this as a reminder that you've earned your place in the Blackwood legacy, not through inheritance or marriage, but through your own character and hard work. With pride and gratitude, Eleanor. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, feeling the weight of the charm against my skin. It wasn't heavy, but it carried the significance of everything Eleanor and Richard had built, and everything I was now responsible for protecting and growing. Marcus found me a few minutes later, standing by the windows overlooking the construction site where our next affordable housing project was beginning. "How are you feeling?" he asked, noticing the new bracelet. "Grateful," I said simply, "and ready for whatever comes next." As I watched the workers below beginning to lay the foundation for homes that would shelter families for generations to come, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the paralegal who felt like an outsider at family dinners to the CEO trusted with a multi-million-dollar legacy, it seemed impossible, but it had happened one decision at a time. Eleanor had seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. The potential to lead with integrity, to balance profit with purpose, to build something that would last. Her faith in my character had given me the confidence to step into a role I never could have imagined for myself. The scandal with Cameron had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. It showed that Eleanor's concerns about entitlement and character weren't abstract worries, they were practical considerations about who could be trusted with the power to affect so many people's lives. Now, as I looked toward the future, I felt ready for the challenges ahead. Blackwood Construction was thriving under my leadership, not despite my outsider status but because of the fresh perspective and unwavering values I brought to the role. The company Eleanor had entrusted to me was more than a business, it was a force for positive change in our community, and I intended to make sure it remained that way for generations to come. 5 years after that shocking day in the lawyer's office, I received a call that brought the story full circle. Carlos Mendoza, the worker who had been injured in Cameron's sabotage, had completed his recovery and had since been promoted to site supervisor. He was calling to tell me that his daughter had been accepted to Stanford University on a scholarship from the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I wanted to thank you personally. When I was lying in that hospital bed, I thought my family's future was ruined. But you didn't just take care of my medical bills, you created opportunities for my children that I never could have imagined." "You earned those opportunities, Carlos," I replied. "Your daughter earned that scholarship through her own hard work and intelligence." "Maybe, but she wouldn't have had the chance without what you built here. This company, this foundation, it's giving kids like mine a shot at a better life." After we hung up, I sat in my office, Eleanor's former office, which I'd finally felt comfortable claiming as my own, and reflected on how far we'd all come. The scared, defensive woman who had felt so out of place at Blackwood family dinners had become someone who could create opportunities for others to rise. The irony wasn't lost on me. Eleanor had chosen me partly because I understood what it felt like to be underestimated, to have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That experience of being an outsider had given me empathy for workers like Carlos and his daughter, people who needed someone to believe in their potential, the way Eleanor had believed in mine. Marcus and I had also grown together through this journey. Watching me navigate the challenges of running a major company had deepened his respect for my capabilities, while his unwavering support had given me the confidence to make difficult decisions. We'd moved into a beautiful house in Sacramento's Midtown district, but we still preferred our quiet evenings at home to the social obligations that came with my position. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked me one evening as we sat on our back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. I thought about the question seriously. There had been challenges: the pressure of leadership, the constant scrutiny, the betrayal by Cameron, the responsibility for hundreds of employees and their families. "No," I said finally. "No regrets. This wasn't the life I planned, but it's been more meaningful than anything I could have imagined." "Eleanor would be proud," Marcus said, reaching for my hand. I touched the bracelet on my wrist, feeling the small hard hat charm that had become my daily reminder of the legacy I carried forward. I hope so. I hope she'd be proud of what we've built. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the families who would be moving into the affordable housing units we'd completed that month. The apprentices who would graduate from our training programs next week, and the communities that would benefit from the projects we had planned for the coming year. Eleanor Blackwood had given me more than a company or a fortune. She'd given me the opportunity to discover what I was truly capable of when someone believed in my potential. That gift had transformed not just my life, but the lives of countless others who had benefited from the choices I'd made as a leader. The scared paralegal who had once felt like she didn't belong in the Blackwood family had become someone who could create belonging for others, and that, I realized, was the most valuable inheritance of all. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have seen your worth? Have you discovered strength you didn't know you had when life forced you to step up? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the people who doubt us the most end up giving us the greatest opportunities to prove them wrong. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of unexpected inheritances, family drama, and finding your true potential. And remember, sometimes the best revenge against those who underestimate you is simply becoming everything they never thought you could be. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's expectations. It's revealed by how you rise to meet the challenges life presents you.